So this is a press preview, a look at the newspapers as they arrive, and we'll talk through those in the next 30 minutes with former advisor to Ed Miliband, Ayesha Hazarika, and The Sun's political editor, Tom Newton-Dunn. Good to see both of you. Before we have a chat, let's just run you through the front pages. The FT says the EU is warning UK companies of a regulatory chill after Brexit as it seeks to accelerate private sector preparations for a no-deal UK exit. Brexit making the front of the Telegraph. It reveals the UK's plans for a bespoke Brexit is at risk of being derailed by Germany. The Prime Minister's reshuffle on the front of the Mail. It describes Mrs May's changes as a massacre of the middle-aged men. The Times reports a leading NHS hospital is delaying chemotherapy for cancer patients and those who are terminally ill facing cuts to their treatment because of a chronic shortage of specialist nurses. The Eye tackles the alleged gender pay gap at the BBC, a Radio 4 presenter taken off air today for supporting a colleague's equal pay demands. The sex abuse trial of a former football coach, Barry Bennell, making the front of The Guardian. Her royal shyness, Harry's bride-to-be Meghan Markle on the front of the Metro. The couple making their first engagement of 2018 in Brixton today. Their headline, May launches a war on waste, looking at plastic. And Meghan, the front of the Star as well. A row broke out about the future royal in the celebrity Big Brother house last night, apparently. And a worrying report in the Express reveals millions of Britain's elderly are reliant on a basic state pension of just £7,000 a year to pay the bills and live in retirement. The Mirror has a story about Lord Lucan's wife. It reports she took her own life over mistaken fears that she had Parkinson's. So let's talk through some of those with Ayesha and with Tom, and we'll kick off with the front of the Mail, should we? The massacre of the middle-aged men, it says. I mean, looking at the minister, the sort of junior ministers today.
Yeah, it was indeed a massacre of the middle-aged men, the pale, male and stale. If you fit that description, which, let's be honest, still a fair number of government ministers and MPs from all parties do, you were in trouble today. There were a total of 7 white, male, middle-aged ministers fired by Theresa May today. Interestingly, 2 of them were given the chance to resign. One of them wrote a wonderful resignation that began, Dear Prime Minister, after our meeting this morning, I have decided to resign. Yeah. So they were sent on their way, some not so happy about it, some extremely unhappy about it. And in their place was a quite extraordinary tidal wave of different-looking people. No less than 16, by my count, 16 women promoted, 8 of them brand new ministers for the first time, and 7 ethnic minority, black and Asian ethnic minority Tory MPs also promoted, taking the number of BAME ministers from 4 to 9. And I did the maths on this as well, a tiny bit if you are so interested, Stephen. And I worked out there are actually only 3 Tory MPs, BAME Tory MPs now, who aren't in the government. Right. 9 of them are. Of those 3, one was only elected 6 months ago, so you can't really expect him to be. Another one was Priti Patel, who was sacked in November, leaving one who somehow managed to miss this pickup. So quite an extraordinary gesture by Theresa May, which is naturally going to win a lot of the headlines tomorrow.
Yeah, well, you would think so. Of course, it's not made it through to the Cabinet, which is what's causing...
Well, exactly. I mean, I think it's really important to be bringing on women, ethnic minorities. I mean, I'm a huge sort of supporter of all of that. But look, a picture does say 1,000 words. That picture does not look like a very diverse bunch of people, and that is the top table, and that is where a lot of the decisions are getting made.
But that's because it's essentially the status quo, isn't it? Apart from, well, Esther McVeigh.
Absolutely, and that is what the story is of this reshuffle. The story is of Theresa May, who could have started the year off flexing some muscle, sending a signal to her party and the public that she's in charge, things are going to be different and something has got to change. But she couldn't do that because everybody refused to go. I think if she'd had the strength to move a couple of people, either Hunt or the big prize would have been Boris Johnson. But clearly they were like, we're not going anywhere. And of course, the big victim of the night was not really Night of the Long Knives, it was like Night of the Butter Knives, really, because it didn't really go anywhere, was Justine Greening, a relatively young woman, Northern Comprehensive School educated, first openly gay lesbian woman in the cabinet. You know, she had challenged Theresa May on grammar schools, and it looked like She got punished for that, whereas somebody like Boris Johnson, who has been, let's be honest, madly disloyal to Theresa May about her leadership, about Brexit, he still gets to keep his job. So I'm afraid this narrative about this being some sort of like advancement for feminism doesn't quite float my boat.
Interesting as well, Justine Greening departure from Cabinet halved the gay representation in the Cabinet from 2 down to 1. So there wasn't a great amount of progress there. And at the Times, I think we've got as well, I've got some nice little numbers. Also, the number of Oxbridge-educated cabinet ministers went up today. The number of comprehensive-educated cabinet ministers went down. I mean, it's tiny fractions because we're basically talking about the departure of 1 or 2. So the problem Theresa May has got is she's trying with these mid and lower ranks, trying incredibly hard indeed, promoting, practically everybody she possibly can who has any ability whatsoever. But like David Cameron before her, she has failed really to punch these sort of different-looking people, more representative of the actual country, into the top grade, as you saw by that picture. And this will be, I'm afraid, the two of them's legacy. They did their very best, perhaps, but they are not changing the face of politics quite yet.
But I mean, in terms of the problems that she faced, I mean, she's got to be very careful about the enemies she creates.
Which is exactly why she's, she was very timid actually on the top ranks. By firing cabinet ministers, she really does open herself up to threat. That's why she tried incredibly hard not to fire a single one of them. Justine Greening walked out having refused a second job in cabinet. And actually, if you look at interestingly, there were quite a few 2015 intake Tory MPs also promoted today. Some very impressive people in that intake, and very impressive, a lot of people they are too. But not one single one of them has been labelled as one of the potential leadership challengers who are men. There are about 4 or 5 Tory intake 2015 men, very good people: Tom Tugendhat, Johnny Mercer, Nigel Huddleston, James Cleverly. James Cleverly got a job in the Tory party, but not one single one of them has been put into government. The reason why? Potentially, they're also a threat to Theresa May if they get a little bit too much of a reputation and too much exposure. So actually, the entire thing has been pretty cautious.
I mean, I just feel like it's another...
I mean, from our perspective, it's a bit of a washout. We're expecting something a little bit more exciting.
Exactly, and I think the problem that Theresa May still faces is that, I mean, it was a little bit boring for us at the end of the day. Imagine what it's like for the public. And the problem that Theresa May has still got is she is still the face of the Conservative Party. She is the Prime Minister, and people still look at her and think, what's going on with you? Are you really in charge of your own party? And what is your vision? What is your narrative? What's your offer to Britain? And she tried to do this thing with fox hunting, a couple of days ago, saying we're not going to bring back this vote. But that just shows you really how desperate the Conservative are. I mean, if their only offer right now is, look, we're not going to have a vote on fox hunting, it's like, wow, you aren't really in touch with the concerns that most people have got the water cooler.
Except if we look at the front of the Metro, and there's, May launches war on waste, and she's talking about plastic waste. Obviously, we're very passionate about that here at Sky, but this is actually something which a lot of people are now sort of tying into.
Very, very much so. This is actually quite a big development, and I'm afraid you're going to hear quite a lot about plastics and the environment over the next couple of days, because on Thursday, the government is launching its great big environment strategy, 25-year environment strategy, which actually, if any other government did in previous years, we'd pay half an eye to, and it'd be of some interest. But this is the absolute, key follow-up to the reshuffle, the key big policy launch of the new year. The reason is, and of course, Theresa May has suddenly reinvented herself as a huge environmentalist, as indeed has Michael Gove, going out of their way to clamp down on plastics, single-use plastics, and the like. And the reason is because it's actually quite popular, especially the sort of vote which they unanimously failed to pick up in the general election last June. Younger people, perhaps more socially liberal people, who deserted the Tories in droves for Jeremy Corbyn. They cared deeply about the environment, so guess what? You go to them. And also, I have to say, it's exactly the same people who don't want to vote on fox hunting as well. It's a very cheap and easy thing to do, so the government, can wave a wand and they can do this sort of stuff. And the final part of it is, you don't need a majority to do it, because the House of Commons is reasonably united, not wanting to overturn the fox hunting ban, and to help the environment a bit more.
I mean, look, nobody could argue this is an excellent thing to be doing. We all care about the environment. Sky's been doing amazing things on the whole plastics. We were all horrified when we saw Blue Planet, and everybody's like, right, we've got to crack down on this. And this is indeed Labour
so your complaint is,
it's not going to be enough if they think that this is
what?
going to swing round the young people,
Yeah.
Tom, the thing that the young people wanted and they liked was, of course, the tuition fees offer was very attractive to them.
Yeah.
But it was also the values of Jeremy Corbyn. They didn't just sing, oh, Jeremy Corbyn at Glastonbury because of tuition fees. He's tapped in, whether you agree or not, he's tapped into a broader set
He's
of
become
values.
a cult figure. Well, I don't think it's a broad set of value, but the fact he has just become a cult figure,
I think a lot of
hasn't
young people do kind of tap into the values of him, and this is a start, but it's like a baby step on what will be a long journey for the Conservatives and young people and a modernising agenda.
I mean, another way of looking at it is, take out left or right in here. Is, what are the real big problems that the government really needs to tackle that we can all agree on? Building houses.
Yeah.
Fine, there are some couple of interesting appointments in the reshuffle, but I don't think they've even started, quite frankly, to tackle that one. Social care.
Yeah.
Fine, Jeremy Hunt gets a new title and gets charge of the whole policy area, but there is no plan at all for that. And meanwhile, every single day, the problem gets bigger with the ageing population.
And you've had all the operations cancelled with
and
the NHS
the third one is the health service itself. A health service under massive pressure. Quite frankly, with a model invented in 1945 that's unsustainable in 2017. Again, no answer that comes from the government.
OK, well, there we must leave it for the time being. More coming up for you in just a moment, including the latest in the row over equal pay at the BBC. So you're watching the press preview with Ayesha Hazarika and Tom Newton-Dunn. Let's talk about money.
Money.
It's all about the money.
Money talks.
Oh, doesn't it just? The eye is I mean, have the BBC shot themselves in the foot with this, and you're taking this on for another day in the headlines?
The BBC seem to have an incredible knack of just sort of not sorting out this issue, but then when it does blow up, they seem to make it even worse. Winifred Robinson, who is a presenter on Radio 4, was not allowed to cover this story because she tweeted in support of Carrie Gracie, the former China editor who has resigned over equal pay. And I think this story just doesn't show any signs of dying down, mainly because the BBC is grotesquely mishandling it at every single turn. We were just discussing in the break, there was an insane situation where Carrie Gracie was getting interviewed on Women's Hour, and one of the key presenters on Women's Hour wasn't allowed to even ask her about it because she has issues with equal pay herself. So the whole corporation needs to just stop for a minute, breathe, and just try and take a look at this sensibly. And this story is also not going to go away because the Commission for Equality and Human Rights is going to look into this and do, I think, some sort of investigation. Because the issue with equal pay is a lot of people have said, well, actually, if you put a man and a woman doing exactly the same job, they do tend to get paid the same. Well, this is an example where quite clearly that is not happening. And so now
unless there are other reasons, because there are quite a number of caveats that can be applied to this by an organisation.
Always the caveats, and I think this is what women are getting sick and tired of. This woman was an experienced foreign editor. There's a language issue in China. China's arguably incredibly important from a geopolitical point of view, and arguably she probably has to do a tougher job to get stories than, let's say, your Washington correspondent who doesn't have a language issue. The BBC's much more established there. They've got the Brexit, the lady in Brussels, who is the editor there, Brussels is the biggest show in town. She gets paid substantially less than male foreign editors, and she's probably on television much more. So I think the BBC, there is really no excuse for the BBC, and they have got to sort it out. If they can make amazing programmes like Blue Planet, and the BBC does amazing things, it cannot be beyond the wit of them to just pay men and women equally.
And there you have exactly the problem. Brilliant programmes made on the BBC on a daily, hourly basis are made by the creatives on the front line. This sort of absolute ridiculous mess is presided over by these management people. And if you ever do any work at the BBC, as I very occasionally do, you're struck by the staggering bureaucracy that exists on every single level, the decision-making that goes into simple editorial things, because it's extraordinary. It's the very worst of British bureaucracy, really. It's probably a hangover from the 1950s, 1940s, when the country was very bureaucratic, and they're simply unable to take some very basic common sense decisions. And quite frankly, the very, very easy way of sorting out this terrible equality pay mess, which they've known about for an awful long time.
They
The numbers
have
came out
such a long
last summer,
time.
so they had 6 or 7 months sorted out. But they would have been aware of these numbers. They've been aware they'd had to publish the numbers, 18 months to 2 years back. It's really, really simple. You don't give everyone underneath the men or the women a massive pay rise, thereby smacking the poor taxpayer for ever more money and taking money out of programme making. You simply reduce these ridiculous salaries that some of the big names are on. Hugh Edwards is on £600,000 a year. The honest answer is he would live perfectly happy if he was on £500,000 a year or even £400,000, because Sky News aren't going to employ him for that sort of money. Neither are ITV.
He's not going to be on the bread line on that, the gluten-free bread line on that sort of thing.
They've got Stephen, who's far better than Hugh Edwards anyway.
Well, I'll say I'm very cheap.
But it's a very, very obvious answer, staring him in the face. And
I completely agree.
Backbench Tory MPs even worked it out today in the House of Commons chamber.
It just needs the will. It needs the will from Tony Hall at the top, and he's going to be questioned by MPs on this as well.
Well, I can say the money has saved us from talking about Brexit in the Telegraph because we're out of time. But no, we'll do that. We'll do that next hour. I look forward to that. Lovely. Thank you for now. Let's get a check on the weather for you.